In the United States, according to local authorities, at least 5 people were killed and several were wounded after a new shooting inside a hospital in the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma. In Colombia, congresspersons of the Green Alliance Party announced their endorsement to the campaign of the Formula for the Historical Pact. Guinea's government board rejected the United Nations call to revoke the ban on political demonstrations. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In the United States, according to local authorities, at least 4 people were killed and several were wounded after a new shooting inside a hospital in the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Data reported that multiple deaths were at the scene, including the death of an attacker. Police reports noted that the shooter died after being shot, the source of which is unknown. The shooting comes just 8 days after a gunman opened fire at the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, killing 19 children and 2 teachers, and also coincides with the anniversary 101st of the Tulsa Race Massacre that took place on May 31st and June 1st, 1921, when mobs of white residents attacked black residents and destroyed homes and businesses of the Greenwood district in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Also in the United States, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg announced that he will meet with senior officials from Turkey, Sweden and Finland to unblock the accession of the Scandinavian nations to the military alliance. At a press conference in Washington, where he met with the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, Stoltenberg confirmed that he will call a meeting to ensure that the accession of Stockholm and Helsinki to NATO moves forward. The entry of Finland and Sweden requires unanimity by the 30 member states of the military bloc. So far, Turkey opposes to this initiative. Stoltenberg said that he hopes to make progress before the NATO leaders summit to be held in Madrid at the end of June to define the organization's roadmap for the coming years.
Thanks, everyone. Like I said, I've spent more time in Brussels City.
Anthony Blinken said that the decision to continue delivering weapons to Ukraine is part of a plan to force Russia to be at the negotiation table.
A moving picture, as the Secretary General said. That's by definition what wars are. And I'll just repeat what I said. As long as this goes on, we want to make sure that Ukraine has in hand what it needs to defend itself, and we want to make sure that Russia is feeling strong pressure from as many countries as possible to end the aggression. That's the best way, we think, to bring the aggression to a close as soon as possible, to end the war, to get to diplomacy, and to stop the suffering.
The Nicaraguan government has authorized the Ministry of Finance and Public Credit to improve the disbursement of all over $382 million to finance the 10th program of expansion and improvement of roads in 9 municipalities of the country. The program includes the expansion of and upgrading for 4 roads sections that will improve quality of life for more than 534,000 Nicaraguans. The initiative seeks to contribute to the socio-economic development of Nicaragua and improve accessibility for the Pacific, the Central and Southern Caribbean coast regions. In El Salvador, social organizations demonstrated in rejection of the 3 years of President Nayib Bukele's administration. Leaders of the Bloc of Resistance and Popular Rebellion and the National Alliance El Salvador en Paz denounced that the government of Bukele is leading to poverty, unemployment, and deterioration of the constitutional order in the country. The demonstrators indicated that in the middle of the regime of exception, over 700 denunciations of arbitrary detentions and violations of human rights. In this context, social movements regret what they considered as the level of hatred and division generated by Bukele, as well as the regression of the nation.
There has been repression of union movements. There have also been thousands of dismissals of workers as union leaders in the different institutions. This government has annihilated boards of directors. It has disrespected the international agreements of the ILO. So it has been hard 3 years for the working class, especially for the union movement in El Salvador.
In Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro Moros led a working day dedicated to productive development in the communities within the framework of the Plan Patria Comunal. From Altos del Índice in Caracas, President Maduro attended to the different problems of the zone, where the citizens presented to the president a map of solutions to attend to the zone. The president also declared after the initiative of the community that the only way to achieve a good government was to govern together with the communities and communal councils.
We have to govern hand in hand with the communes, the communal councils, the people's power. The people's power knows everything. The people's power can do everything. The people's power knows what the problems are. The people's power knows what the solutions are. So in this new stage of transition to socialism, the 3R.net, we have to go in depth to govern from the people's power, with the people's power, for the people's power.
Peru's court will have to rule on the legality of congressional acts after new protection actions for violation of due process in the election of the public defender, among other cases. The action against the election of the public defender alleged non-compliance with the law, which establishes a maximum of 9 members of the Electoral Commission. The Office of the Public Defenders Union, in its capacity as plaintiff, filed at the same time a precautionary measure so that the election be without effect until the merits of the protection appeal are resolved. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. In Colombia, congresspersons of the Green Alliance Party announced their endorsement to the campaign of the Formula for the Historical Pact coalition, facing the presidential runoff election on June 19th. This was informed by the political party's elected senators, Ariel Ávila and Antoni Sanguino, who together with the Green Alliance supporters offered their backing to the Gustavo Petro and Francia Márquez ticket. The political leaders explained their decision by saying that the nation's priority was the change towards inclusion and equality. They also made a call to leave polarization and attacks behind and go to the streets to win the people's vote. Systematic violence persists in Colombia. The Institute for Studies for Development and Peace in the past registered a new massacre perpetrated in the department of Magdalena. The incident took place in the locality of Tucurina when a group of armed men entered the house and attacked those present. The victims were identified as José Romero Polo, 42, Brian Castillo Polo, 24, and Andrés Orozco Villa, 22. Another man was found dead 100 meters away from the area where the first incident occurred. According to INDEPAS data, with this event, there are now a total of 45 massacres registered in the country so far in 2022. Rescue teams are working against the clock to save 14 workers trapped since Monday in a coal mine in the Colombian municipality of Zulia, northeast, after an explosion caused by a gas buildup. Almost 50 rescuers seek to descend to about 200 meters underground to find the miners who were trapped. Catalina George, who leads the search operation of the State National Mining Agency, estimates that they will arrive tomorrow, hopefully at dawn. The causes of the accident are still under investigation. One of the workers, who was out of the strength at the time of the accident, died this Wednesday from severe burns.
We have advanced 70% in terms of distance from the point where the miners were supposed to be working. Let's say positive progress has been made. We are always looking for people with the hope that they are alive, but it's also important to say that it was a very strong explosion in where there were high temperatures, very high pressure, and high concentration of carbon monoxide.
Now we address other topics. The world is facing the worst energy crisis in more than 50 years, according to the International Energy Agency, IEA. The director of the agency, Fatih Birol, explained that the Russia-Ukraine conflict has a direct impact on the worsening of the crisis, which in the 70s involved only oil. Given that the growing demand in rubles as fuel, electricity and gas in Europe and the United States contrasts with the measures applied by the European bloc against the Eurasian nation, which envisages the ban on imports of Russian crude oil, threatening the stability of energy supplies. The Russian government warned about the negative impact on the global energy market of the European Union's sanctions against the Eurasian giant's oil. The Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, said that the oil embargo against Russia will affect not only Europe, but also the whole world. These statements come after the European Union announced new sanctions against Russian oil and the exclusion of the Russian bank Sberbank from the SWIFT financial communication system, as well as the burning of 3 Russian state television channels. Peskov also reiterated that Moscow is making efforts to redirect its exports of energy products and minimize the negative consequences of the sanctions imposed by Europe. Gazprom completely suspends gas supplies to 2 operators in Germany and Denmark after the deadline for payment in rubles. The 2 operators who will suffer the suspension of gas supplies are Shell Energy in Germany and Ørsted in Denmark. According to Russian authorities, both companies were informed in time that payments for gas supplied from the 1st of April had to be made in rubles in the framework of the new requirements implemented by Moscow in the face of foreign sanctions. These companies refused to make such payments. A similar measure, and for the same reasons, also began to be applied this Tuesday, May 31st, to the company Gasterra from the Netherlands. An explosion in Russia caused by a gas leak in the residential building in the city of Mytishchi, northeast of Moscow, killed at least 1 person and injured 2. The prosecutor's office in Moscow reported that the blast occurred on the 3rd floor of a 5-story building. An emergency team is on the scene, carried out the evacuation and the inspection of the premises. The victims' identities are still being processed. The injured were taken to hospitals where they are receiving proper care. During a visit to Saudi Arabia, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Ukraine's requests for weapons supplies are a direct provocation aimed at drawing the West into hostilities.
This is the direct provocation aimed at drawing the West into hostilities. Serious countries in the European Union, of course, are well aware of the unacceptability of such scenarios. It also seems that we recently heard signs of reasonable assessment from Washington.
And the oil embargo by the European Union aimed at punishing Russia for its special military operation in Ukraine is putting one of Italy's largest refineries at risk, and that will be a terrible blow for the economy of an already depressed region. The refinery, owned by Russia's Lukoil, is located in Priolo, Sicily, and it employs 3,500 people at 3 production sites, including a refinery and gasification plant and an electricity-generated plant in the Sicilian province of Syracuse. The plant and its branch industries generate half of the provincial GDP and 8% of the regions. It processed 1/5 of Italy's crude oil imports. Because of the embargo, refinery workers are increasingly concerned about their future.
Of course, we are worried about our jobs, and also because if Lukoil disappears, there are other industries connected to it. There will be a domino effect, that is, the collapse of the whole system, which involves other companies in the chemical sector, the port, and all the interconnected companies. We're talking about 10,000 jobs, representing 50% of the gross domestic production of this province.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. So we are back. Guinea's government junta rejected the United Nations call to revoke the ban on political demonstrations, which allows them only during the election period 3 years from now. The junta, composed of army officers led by Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, said in a communiqué that no march will be authorized until public order could be guaranteed. It also pointed out that it had already established institutions where contradictions and misunderstandings could be debated quite calmly. It further specified that nothing could justify marches during this sensitive period of national life in which Guineans have once again begun to speak to each other as brothers. Hundreds of Sudanese protesters rallied on Wednesday in front of the United Nations mission in Khartoum to call for its dismissal. The protesters criticized efforts by the UN envoy Volker Perthes to resolve the political crisis in the country since last year's military coup. The rallies came as the UN Security Council reflected on extending the mission's mandate beyond June the 3rd. Demonstrators accused Volker of interfering in Sudan's internal affairs. Sudan has been rocked by deepening unrest since a 2019 coup sparked regular protests across much of the country. The power grab derailed a fragile power-sharing agreement between the army and the civilians negotiated after an ouster of Omar al-Bashir. Violent crackdown on the protesters and demonstrations has left nearly 100 people killed.
Volker must leave today, before tomorrow. If he doesn't, we will make him leave by force. We will not plead, write reports, suspicious to the United Nations. It will be by force, by direct force. Volker came to involve forces of freedom and change back in the Sudanese society. The Sudanese society is against these parties. These people work for their own benefit and their work involves exclusion and vengeance. We will not stop and we will not calm down until the problems in Sudan are resolved by the Sudanese.
The United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator for Somalia warned about the millions of Somalis affected by severe drought. The alert came on Tuesday as officials visited a camp for internally displaced people in the Baidoa district. Somalia's newly appointed special presidential envoy for drought response appealed for help to the international community. The African country faces a growing crisis resulting from the combination of drought, economical crisis, and the effects of the Western sanctions on Russia, because nearly all the wheat sold in Somalia comes from Ukraine and Russia, and these shipments were affected since the application of these sanctions. Now we move on to other topics. This Wednesday, the number of deaths caused by floods and landslides caused by rain in the Brazilian state of Pernambuco amounted to 120, local media reported, citing authorities. According to a Pernambuco government report issued on Wednesday night, 5 bodies, including a child, were recovered between the city of Recife and the municipality of Leomeiro. With the help of sniffer dogs and aircraft, more than 400 firefighters and military personnel continued to search for the last disappeared under the mud that swept through the entire neighborhoods in the metropolitan region of the state's capital, Recife. At least 24 municipalities in the state declared the emergency because of the devastation, which left more than 6,000 homeless or displaced people, as well as a major damage to infrastructure. The government of Peru extended the environmental emergency declaration after the crude oil spill on January 15th at the La Pampilla refinery managed by the Spanish transnational Repsol. The Ministry of the Environment, MINAM, ordered the extension for 90 more days of the environmental emergency declaration in the geographic area that includes the coastal marine zone of the sea and coast of Lima. The extension is effective as of June 2nd, establishing that the activities of the action plan to recover the zones that are still affected will continue. Likewise, the government described the event as the worst environmental disaster that has occurred in Lima in recent times. So we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.